Hello, hello, and welcome to the Finding the Unicorn in You podcast. What a beautiful day to inspire lives. My name is Jaime RAYGOZA, your host, and I am so excited to have you here. Let's get ready to meet some fantastic unicorns and learn how to unleash the inner unicorn in you. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Finding the Unicorn in You. Today, I have a very extra special guest. She's an international recognized speaker in the mindset industry with her signature speech, The Disease of Playing Small, featured on Amazon Prime video series Speak Up on season 4. Her number one best-selling book, Rescue to Recovery, is her story navigating over 30 years of undiagnosed post-traumatic stress disorder. One of her goals is to convey that an honest assessment of ourselves is paramount to success in life. And she is also a mental fitness facilitator at Polk Institute and is a veteran of the United States Coast Guard. So without further ado, I have Miss Tracey Brown.
Hi, good to meet you.
Welcome. Thank you once again for being here. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and talk about your book?
Yeah, I was burned when I was 8 years old, so I was severely burned, and that was pretty gnarly for a lot of years. But I have a great mom. She really helped me through that and helped me understand that I can pretty much pull anything off if I so choose to. And fast forward a few years, I was in the United States Coast Guard. Way back in the galaxy far away in 1983, I went in. So I it was a whole different world in 1983.
Mm-hmm.
But the Coast Guard didn't have a swimmer school, and so they actually relied on people, crew members saying, "Yeah, okay, I'll be the swimmer, designated swimmer on the boat." So I was a designated swimmer up in San Francisco, California. Now they have a designation as a rescue swimmer, because the school came about in, I believe, 85 or 86. I was already moved on to other things at that point in time. But yeah, and that's really where a lot of triggers for the post-traumatic stress came out. And years and years of undiagnosed, finally landed at the VA, thankfully, with the help of some really amazing friends and helped me navigate to get into the VA, because that's a whole nother game. And went through some great therapy and some counseling. And so the book really was kind of the journey of how trauma really affects us. And I'm also a director of rehabilitation, physical rehabilitation, and I specialize in scar tissue. And I really started to put together the similarities between physical scars, physical injuries, or insults, as they call them, to emotional insults. There's a lot of similarities to that. So we can get into that as much as you like. Big part of what I talk about is bridging those, the understanding of how emotional injuries. And now, what we've all been through in the last couple of years, everybody's pretty much experienced some kind of trauma. And so it's really something we talked earlier about, everybody telling their stories. Well, we all have stories right now, a lot of stories. So I love that we're doing this.
Very extensive background, and I have so many questions.
Hands on, I'm there.
So let's start. So you said you got burned when you were young.
Yes.
So how was that? How old were you? Like, what happened, if you don't mind asking?
I don't mind asking at all. I was 8 years old, and this is 1969. So go way back. There's no 911. There's right. Okay. So you don't have that. And so I was doing, my mom was Christmas shopping. So it was December 19th. And so we had a babysitter. There's 5 kids, and we decided we're going to do a play for the moms when they come back. And I reached over a candle, and it melted the tape. So mind you, there were no fire retardant, costumes then too. So you had to make your own. So I had a flannel shirt. We took cotton balls and we put them around my wrist and made a cotton ball beard. And so I reached over the candle. It melted the tape. It caught on fire. I was shaking my hand, and when I shook my hand, it caught my beard on fire and exploded in my face.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So that was, I don't know, 2-3 months in the hospital. They didn't really know what to do with me. 1969, no burn wards, no burn specialists, So it's like, gosh, I hope she makes it. Then they realized, oh, likely she's alive, so we should probably do something. So there was a 10-year outpatient process.
Wow.
So from the time of 8 years old to 18, I had several different surgeries and whatnot. And then by the time I was 21, I went in the Coast Guard.
Oh, and how was it growing up? Like, because you had burn scars, I'm guessing.
Oh, yeah, gnarly scars. Yeah, and I ones that went down my face like this, because that's where the tape was for, beer, melted basically to my face. And, kids are cruel. They really are. And you either get a really thick skin or, just forget about it. I mean, it's just, kids are brutal. And so, yeah, there's a lot of, name calling, but, I was pretty tough. I was a tough little kid. And, I fought back a lot and told a lot of stories, and a lot of stories were told to me about, what happened. It was, pretty interesting, but kids are cruel, and partially because they're just freaking honest. I mean, they can't help themselves. Like, wow, you look different. And it's like, well, yeah, I do, So, I mean, they're crazy honest, but they can also be mean too. So
I had my fair share of bullies in high school, and they pick any little thing. It doesn't even have anything.
Anything. And we all know that now that we're adults that bullies are just really insecure little individuals. They're arrogance is really just being loud for insufficiency or insecurity. So bless them, but we didn't know that when we were kids.
Oh no, we just go through
it hurt.
So going to the Coast Guard, and you said that there was no. So Coast Guard is, for those that don't know, you're saving people who are in crisis in water, right? So like if something happens, like a boat, there's an issue there, or there's like a severe accident where people are now in distress, you go in there. But you said that there was no swimmer program.
No, there was. Exactly. How do we get these people out? Well, you jump in and get them. And, in 1983, they didn't have a swimmer school, what they call the swimmer school. They do now. And it's an elite group of people. I always give props to them. I probably, if I think about it now, just because of my size, I'm a good damn 5'2". But I probably would not have made it through that school. It's grueling. And so, big props to those who have graduated and made it through. And I think there's 5 women that have made it through that program. But in 83, they didn't have that. So we had a 3-week course locally. I was up in San Francisco in the San Francisco Bay, and we had a 3-week course locally. Here's how these waters are, this is what you do when you rescue somebody. You get a basket if you're working with a helicopter or if you're working with a boat. However you're doing this is how we do these things. Here's some EMT training, emergency medical technician. We'll get you up to speed on, CPR and all those kind of things. And I hope it works out. In a survival suit, and again, on a good day, I'm 5'2", so I had a men's medium because the Coast Guard in those days, we not only did search and rescue, for people in distress, but we did law enforcement, we did firefighting. I mean, we did, safety at life at sea inspections. I mean, we just pretty much did everything that needed to be done on the water. And but we were under Department of Transportation at that point in time. Yes, we were part of the military, but in peacetime, we were under the Department of Transportation. And so they didn't have a lot of money. So it's like, okay, here's a men's medium suit. It's the smallest one we got. Figure it out. So I put duct tape at the bottom of my feet, on my ankles, duct tape on my wrist, and tried to stay as warm as I could when I got in the water.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Figure it out.
Wow. Once upon a time ago, I was, like I always say, many moons ago, I was a lifeguard, and I wanted to become a lifeguard in the beach. And one of the things that they brought is they actually brought some Coast Guard individuals, like very big, thick men. And and on top of that, they put like a weight suit on, and they're like, save them. Like, they're going to be on the bottom. And then it was just very intense. And I was a little traumatized just by the training. So I could only imagine not having any training and then just jumping yourself in there.
Yeah, especially San Francisco Bay. It's like, just fill up a big canyon and put water in it. Let's see what the tides do. That's crazy. Yeah. So, and I got to say, the 3-week training was pretty amazing. It's super intense, yes. But the Coast Guard, militaries in general, they are just training obsessed, which is huge because when you, and I talk about this in the book, is fight, flight, or freeze. When you get into an intense situation, the brain shuts off. And the reason why we train so much is because when the brain shuts off, you want to work on muscle memory and things that you know to do. So you just do it. So training is hugely important in law enforcement or military or anything like that, because you are in highly, highly stressed situations and you want to be able to function because you're there to help if all goes well.
So how often, after, because I know you were in the Coast Guard, and then how long after did you write the book?
Oh gosh, long time. I was pretty after the Coast Guard. I just tell people I was a mess. You don't realize, especially back then. I mean, they'd give you a physical and a dental exam, and it's like, gosh, you look okay, have a great life,
Mm.
and they didn't do a psych eval at that point in time. It was just not, hey, how are you after all that stuff? And it's like, well, I'm kind of screwed up. So so I was really in a wilderness kind of way for a long time. Really survival. I did a lot. I tried to work for different people, and I didn't really do very well because they've come to find out that post traumatic stress, you don't do well with other kids on the
Mhm.
sandbox, and so. Um, I just kind of figured things out and did what I could and read a lot of self-help books. I talk about that in my book. But Brene Brown is funny. She talks about self-help is really kind of a misnomer because when you're in certain spaces, you can't help yourself. I don't care how many books you read.
Mhm.
You really need somebody outside looking in. Great friend of mine, again, I mentioned him in my book. He actually helped me navigate getting into the VA so I could get some therapy, very specific. And they've got some amazing programs on PTSD, trauma, and all that kind of stuff. And so it was actually in that time. This was 2018 now, so I got out in 87.
Mhm.
So now you fast forward to 2018 is the first time I'm getting any kind of therapy.
Wow.
And so, and in the meantime, I was talking to a friend of mine because I'd always wanted to write a book ever since I was a kid, whatever is in you to write it, never could. And so we started the process, and I realized I couldn't access any of the emotions. And that's when I go, wow, maybe I do need some therapy.
Wow.
Maybe these things are affecting me. Maybe this stuff that happened way, way long ago
Mhm.
is actually something that is affecting me now. And that's true. Again, we go back to the scar tissue therapy that I do. That's the same with an old injury. I've worked on people that had an injury 30 years ago, and it's affecting them now because they lose range of motion. There's
Mhm.
pain. They're not able to, right? Well, that's the same thing we lose emotionally. We lose our emotional range of motion from the
Mhm.
traumas that we have had to our heart and to our mind,
That
right?
makes sense. Mhm.
Really losing my emotional range of motion so much so that I was really kind of blocking a lot of people out. I wouldn't let people see those scars. I wouldn't let people see that pain. You only come out and play when you're in a good mood, right?
Uh-huh.
So, so my world became smaller and smaller. Hence the talk on Amazon Prime about the dis-ease of playing small,
Yeah.
and it's saying the word dis-ease. And there's a discomfort, there's a pain when we're not really expressing ourselves fully as who we are. So so that all kind of tied together when the book came about. But I really needed to have somebody look in and say, oh, this is how this is working, and this is how this works, and when this happens, this happens. It's like, oh, well, gosh, there's a light bulb, you know.
Yeah. And I think what you said is it's super important because a lot of us we feel like we can do this on our own. Like, yeah, I'm going to buy the self-help books. I'm going to do the journaling. I'm going to do all this on my own. I know what to do, but without someone really seeing out in, like you're going back into the same behaviors. You're committing the same type of symptoms, and it's really hard. That's why go get therapy, go work with a mental health coach, seek out friends, a network to really help you get out of your bubble. Because when you're in the bubble, it's super hard.
It's super hard, and you really can't. A friend of mine, she's a coach, and look, we're all inside a jar, and we can't read our own label.
Mm-hmm.
Such a great analogy. It's such
I
a great
love that.
right, and it's so true. And you know, looking back now after the therapy, I can go back to those books and go, wow, what great information that was. And I survived X, Y, and Z, but behavioral modification doesn't work. Something has to change on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
Everything, a lot of things I talk about in my next book that I'm going to be working on, it's an inside job. Yeah. And nobody can do that. I had people saying, you might want to do therapy. And it's like, no, that happened a long time ago. That's not bothering me at all. And part of it was I was scared to open Pandora's box.
Yeah.
Right. And part of it was that I really couldn't fathom that, God, is it really still affecting me? And yeah, it is. If it's not worked out, it's still there.
that we just tend to like repress it and we try to forget about it. But there's certain behaviors that we've kind of developed to adapt to avoid that is more harming than good.
Yes, absolutely. The thing that protected you at one point in time is now really, really hindering you.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, it's an amazing, amazing thing.
So I know this is a big transition, and the whole thing of this season is transitions that people go in their lives. And so if someone's going through this transition, especially right now because of the pandemic, so many people are experiencing some form of PTSD from what we went through these past three and a half years. So what are some signs and symptoms that you would say are good to kind of notice for someone who has experienced a traumatic event and maybe displaying some type of PTSD?
That's a great question. One of the things that express to people is when it comes to post-traumatic stress, let's just take that. Let's take the D off, because disorder, that threw me off a lot. It's like, I'm not disordered. But post-traumatic stress is something that every single human being goes through after a trauma. Post-traumatic stress. Every single person goes through it. Whether you think you do or not, you do. It's a physiological thing that happens, okay? And an emotional thing that happens. Now, some people, they just move right through it. They talk about it, they work through it or whatever, and it goes. 20% of the population, they go into a loop. The 20% of the people that have experienced trauma are affected by it. Okay, so let's just say that. Now, what I noticed was, first and foremost, and that's one of the things that I really started examining, is like, I'm not reacting to things the way that other people do. Like, I'd have a knee jerk to certain things and I would just go off on a rage. That's post-traumatic stress disorder. I mean, it's like, it's so in you that, man, the minute the trigger hits, you're in a rage. It could be as simple as you're just constantly irritated. You're always in the state of irritation, or this feeling inside that there's just this little unsettling, right? That's one. There's so many different characteristics. An aversion to authority. A lot of us have that anyway, but it could be that. But sleep, to me, the lack of sleep, I think, is probably the most common. Because when you've had trauma, or when there's been this, you go in this high anxiety or whatever, sleep is difficult. And sleep is the number one thing that perpetuates the loop, the lack of sleep. Because you get irritated, you just go into this whole loop. I talk to, when I talk to groups and when I talk to corporations or even individuals, we talk about health and nutrition. How are you eating? What are your eating habits? What are your sleep habits? Are you drinking water? Are you exercising? Right? Depression is another characteristic of post-traumatic stress. Depression. Exercise is 8 times more effective against depression than any medication on the market to date. So imagine that. If you feel like you're a bit depressed or you're just kind of a low energy, get out and go for a walk. Do 20 minutes, get your heart rate up a little bit. It does great things in the brain chemistry and dopamine and all those kind of wonderful things. You're happy from the chemicals. So depression, anxiety, that distress that's in you, lack of sleep, those are probably the big ones that I can come up with off the top of my head. I mean, I've got a list of 44 of them that you go into the military, go to the VA, and they're like, what does this affect you? And I was like, oh yeah. That. Just check all the boxes.
And it's very interesting because they do overlap, and a lot of people think I can only have one thing at a time. So I'll have PTSD, or I'll have depression, or I'll have an anxiety disorder, but they can't intermingle, but they can.
Oh, yes, they do. And more often than not, it's never, it's one of those things, it's never just one thing. It's this perfect little storm of emotions that go off, and they can all go under the umbrella of post-traumatic stress.
Exactly. So knowing everything that you know now about PTSD, about what you went through, the Coast Guard, the burn, everything that you've gone through, looking back, what is something you know now that you wish you can tell yourself, or you would have known earlier as a child, that would have benefited your life and maybe switched it for the better?
That's a really great question. Myself through this whole process was, wow, I wish I knew that. I wish I knew that post-traumatic stress is a normal process.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you see post-traumatic stress disorder, well, you think there's something abnormal about you.
Mm-hmm.
There's something wrong with me. But in fact, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. You are going through a process that's so normal that every single human being goes through it. And I try to liken it to, if I broke my ankle,
Mm-hmm.
I'm really not going to go, it'll be okay. Fine. I'm just going to walk on it, and I'm not going to get it treated. Well, that's the kind of the same thing as post-traumatic stress.
Mm-hmm.
It's an insult to your soul. It's just as viable as a broken ankle, and you really need to see somebody or talk to somebody that understands how that functions and how to fix it.
Exactly.
Because
And
it's normal.
that is so true. And I think people see mental health issues as kind of those internal bruises when you hit yourself like on the side of the table or something, and you're like, oh, you look at yourself, I'm fine. But then a few hours later, you see like like that. You're like, oh wow, I have like a bruise.
What happened there?
I know. And you're like, whatever. But then sometimes that could be a big issue, and it'll start growing and growing because you nicked a vein or something. And it's the same way. It's just because you can't see it doesn't mean it isn't an issue.
Right. And the other thing is, just because it wasn't a single issue, and this goes into when things happen repetitive things. So you have in physical world, there's an overuse syndrome, and it will create the same pain, the same inabilities, the same lack of motion as a blunt force trauma. It's just something that's happened over time.
Mm-hmm.
You think about somebody that might be in an abusive relationship, and that's constant. So they can't pinpoint one thing because it's all of these things that have been put together and accumulated. So you have the same issue of post-traumatic stress from a repetitive thing as you do from, say, a single incident. And that's really confusing because it all gets very forensic. When I do scar tissue therapy, very seldom is there a camera when something happens, right? So you have to deduce, okay, then you can't do this and you can't do that. Well, it sounds to me, without pictures or x-rays or MRIs, sounds to me like you got a tear in a tendon or something like that. You're still going to treat it the same way as any other injury, whether it's overuse or whether it's blunt force. I'm going to treat it the same way because it's creating the same problem. It's a post-traumatic stress. It's just that it's the same kind of an injury.
And then for scar tissue therapy, so is this a form of like physical therapy, or just explain a little bit more?
Yeah. So scar tissue, and it goes back and forth of the PTSD. Scar tissue is one of those things in medical terms, it's called confused tissue. Interesting, right? So when you muscles and tendons, they're fibrous and they move against each other and they contract and they relax, right? Well, when there's an injury or overuse, then you get all knotted up. And now you can't move. There's no movement. There's no space there. So I work with actually a tool that works on a high frequency vibration, and it's tuned, if you will, to reorganize scar tissue. So it realigns it.
Okay.
So, and so we do the same thing emotionally. When we work with somebody, we're taking that confused state, right, of how we cope and all these kind of things and putting all these things together and trying to make it work, and it doesn't. We're taking that confused state and we're trying to reorganize it, whether it be through definitions, whether it be through understanding, whatever it is that whoever it is you're working with sees fit for you to go through to reorganize how your heart and your spirit work together. It's pretty cool. But yeah, scar tissue is one of those things, it'll continue to grow unless you address it. Which is why I'll have somebody with a 30-year injury. It's like, I didn't do anything, and all of a sudden, well, there's no such thing as all of a sudden in the body unless they're the blunt force trauma. So if they don't remember an incident, then it's most probably an overuse issue, and they do like working with a mouse or throwing a ball or whatever it is they're doing over and over and over again, and all of a sudden that joint or whatever is just like, I'm kind of done. And it's like, okay, let's figure out why.
Got it. And then if people wait too long to the point where they have like limited mobility or they can't use that muscle, can you still fix it, or is it kind of?
I do it all the time.
Okay.
Usually the last person people see there is like, I've tried this, and I'm like, okay. and we have great success. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. So it's not like an end, like that's too late. You can still work on it.
Most, I'm going to say most of the time, yes. I would, I tell people the only time that I really have a hard time working with something, if there's a muscle torn off a bone, I really can't put it back together. The docs can't have the science, so that.
Okay.
But 90% of all injuries are soft tissue, which is a muscle, ligament, or tendon.
Mhm.
And most of them are pretty healable. We'll just use that word. I don't want to get in any kind of legal trouble saying yes, I can fix everything, because I
Yeah.
don't. But a lot of things are especially if you address them properly. So yeah, it's pretty amazing. I've had people that couldn't lift their arm more than a quarter of the way up their side, and they're like, yeah, it just stops, and it's like, it's frozen. It's called frozen shoulder for a reason.
Hmm.
Uh, I'd have to say I have right now, I have 100% healing rate.
Nice. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, it's really fun. Fun to see somebody that couldn't throw a ball, you know, literally months later go, I never thought I'd be able to do this. I just never thought I could. And it's very, very, very rewarding.
Oh, that's amazing. And they must be so happy, especially when you feel like your body's working against you. It's like one of the worst feelings.
Right? Yeah, that's true. And it is working against you. It's trying to protect itself, you know?
Mhm.
What PTSD does. I'm just trying to protect you. Don't go out and play with people. Don't have fun.
Mhm. It's a negative coping mechanism.
Yep, exactly. Exactly.
So if someone is going through PTSD right now, what advice would you give them that would help them through this process?
If they know it or they suspect it.
Mhm.
So the first thing I tell people, I just say it would be very, very beneficial, and it's one of the hardest things to do. Believe me, I understand this, is to tell someone your pain.
Mhm.
Find somebody that you trust that's not going to exploit or ridicule, or, somebody that is kind and will be gracious with you, and somebody that you trust, and tell them your pain. That to me is the first step. Before I had any counseling, there was one person, only one person, who was actually a former Coast Guard herself. She was a pilot, and she was the only person I ever told one story to, and it was the scariest thing I'd ever done, but probably started the crack in the armor to get me to talk to others.
Mhm.
But find somebody that you trust, and just ask them if you can tell them your pain, because that's a real good start. Find someone you trust. And then if you feel comfortable, I highly, highly recommend find somebody that specializes in trauma. And grief is a different thing to go through. Trauma is something to go through. Abuse. They're all very specialized. So find somebody that specializes in the trauma that you've been through.
That's great advice. And don't, yeah, if you go to just one person that is not specializing in that, then, I mean, they could help you, but it may not be as great of a help than go to like a specialist.
Right. It's a start. And it's one of those things that, I've working with patients. It's like, I've been to this specialist, I've been to this person, this person, this person. They didn't, they kind of helped, but it didn't really get me to where I need to go. And, it's like anything, don't stop until you're full, until you're, complete and you're healed. Don't stop. Just keep pushing until because there is healing. There is hope. There's always hope. And so don't stop until you're whole.
I completely agree. And switching that question around, what is one piece of advice that someone once told you that kind of like lit that light bulb or kind of changed your life a little bit?
This is a good one. She was my coach when I was writing my book. She basically told me, no more hiding.
Mm.
And it was really, really impactful for me because, as Brene Brown says, connection starts right when we when we see people and we allow them to see us.
Exactly.
He said, no more hiding. This book of yours is really basically you standing there spiritually naked. No more hiding. And it was really, it's scary, right? Because it's unknown. You don't know what's on the other side of that one. But it was the most freeing thing I've ever had in my entire life. And all those years of that, there was just a little something in this inside that was just uncomfortable. That little dis-ease, right? Was gone. Just, you hear people talk about, oh, so-and-so is really comfortable in their own skin. Well, that's kind of what it was. It was really getting that comfort in your skin and knowing it's like, this is me. This is what you get. If you don't like it, all good. I'm not everybody's cup of tea, but I'm certainly everybody's cup of tequila. But, it's just, and it's okay. Not everybody has to like me. Not everybody has to like everybody. We find our weird and we kind of go with it.
Yeah. And I know what the theme of this, one of the themes of this podcast is what are some ways that people can tap into their inner unicorn? And you show yourself very vulnerably. You put yourself out there. You put your story out there. You're willing to talk about it. And these are really key factors that I think make you a unicorn. So for you, what are some key factors that maybe people can work on to help them tap into their inner unicorn?
Love it. Thank you for that question. This is my favorite part of any speech I ever give. And it really comes down to two questions. The one, and this is questions we ask ourselves, so I always ask it in the first person. What do I want? It's a huge, huge question. But I have people break it down into, whether it be business, life, love, relationships, family, whatever, vacations. But there's an old saying, you can't hit a target you can't see.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so, what do you want? And there's a guy, Bob Proctor. He's an amazing human being, a philosopher and businessman. But he talks about want is the only precursor to a decision. Okay? So I ask people, it's like, what do you want? What do I want? And narrow it down, get crystal clear. We get this life. And more people we take more time planning a vacation than we do planning our destiny.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh my God, I'm going to do this and this. How specific do you get when you go on a vacation? Well, how about you get really specific about what you want? Take time. Take time to assess yourself. Assess what you love, because I believe that if you love what you do in life, you'll never work a day in your life, right? So take the time. Take the time to understand what you like, what you want, and then once you get close to that question, because it's a constant asking. I mean, I'm asking myself every, okay, what do I want today? What do I want? It's just this session now. But once you know what you want in, let's say, one category, then you have to ask yourself a real question. What are you willing to do to get it? Right? Ethically, legally, morally, right? But what are you willing to do? So I work with people that want to lose weight at times, right? And it's like, okay, that's what you want. What are you willing to do to get it? What's your factor here? What are you willing to change your diet? Are you willing to exercise? Are you willing to get some sleep? Are you willing to take the time to get the water that you need? Are you willing to do these things? Because if you're not willing to do those things, you really don't want that badly. Right? So what do you want? And take the time. And this is not, I think I'll take a half an hour today and figure out what I want. Really? How about we take some time? This is your life. And especially when it comes to what do I want to do for a living? Do you know that statistically 85% of the people on the planet hate what they do?
Wow.
They hate their job. That's like, they go to college, they get a degree, and they don't work in that degree, and they hate what they do. And it's like, how about we take a day? How about we take a couple days? How about we take a month? How about we take some really good time and figure out what I really want? Because I bet you, whatever it is that you really want to do, you're probably really good at it. You're willing to work hard enough to get good at it. What was it? Kobe Bryant, he didn't even make his high school basketball team. It was either Kobe or Jordan. Didn't even make a basketball team. It was like, really? Wanted to do it. So what did he do? He was willing to work his ass off. Because that's what he really wanted to do. So, take the time to figure out what you want. And if you're blocked, if you're finding that you're having a hard time, seeing those things, maybe talk to somebody about your pain. Because I'm telling you, scar tissue or injuries to the soul will block us. They will tell us that we can't. You can't do this. You can't do that. And it's not true. Those who think they can and those who think they can't are both usually right.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I think I can do something. I'm going to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
So, and if somebody tells me I can't, then I really figure it out.
Exactly. And I think an important part of that too is that it's okay to pivot. So just because you planned everything out today, it doesn't have to be, it needs to be cemented in stone.
No,
You can always change your.
it's fluid.
Mm-hmm.
It's like water. It's just follow the flow. It's just like, oh, I like that. That's really good. We'll explore it. That whole thing, and there's no box. There's like, get out of the box. There is no box.
Exactly. And do what you want to do, not what other people are pressuring you to do. You need to be really honest with your answers. What is it that I really want to do? And what am I willing to sacrifice to get there, like you said?
And sometimes that can be a little too broad for some people. So it's like, maybe asking yourself the question, what would just bring me absolute joy? What is it that brings me absolute joy? And then, okay, let's say it's travel or something like that. That's great. How are you going to monetize it? Because I hate to say it, but we still got to make money, right? You still got to. So figure out, and this is the key to monetization, is solve a problem. If you want to travel, well, solve a problem. Well, and I had a friend, she loves sailing and traveling. She actually owns a company that actually does all the reconnaissance for all these places all over around the world and places. So you go into this little teeny tiny port in Mexico. Well, there's this grocery store here. You go this way. So she was able to monetize her travel. Brilliant.
Uh-huh.
Solve a problem with your passion. Jeff Bezos did that. Books. Amazon started as just a library, basically, where you could check out books or buy them. Right?
So true.
Solve the problem. So if you can solve a problem with your passion, you're golden.
Yep. And just because something's out there doesn't mean you can't work on it, improve it, or mimic it and make it better.
Exactly. That's an absolute truth. And actually, most things are like that. The first go round of certain things, that's really great, but most people improve on it.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones that go, and you're like, well,
And as we're wrapping up, I love this conversation. You definitely you've spilled a lot of really good golden nuggets in here. What is one thing that you want people to leave with today? If there's one thing that they leave with the conversation we had today, what would it be?
You know what? You as a unicorn are the greatest gift that you can give to this world. You being you, right? There's no one else like you. There's no other fingerprints. There's nothing else like you. And you, in your unicornness, really are the greatest gift that you can give to this world, with the caveat of be the best you you can be.
Mm-hmm.
Find out what it is that you want. Look for, take the time to know you, because you are an amazing human being. You really are. You just are. You're amazing. You're individual. You're unique, and you have so much to give. And we need you.
Yeah.
Like stories. We need you. We need the unicorns. We need you. We need everybody. We need the unicorn army.
Yes, definitely. Right. That was beautifully said. So if anybody wants to work with you or get connected with you, how can they do so?
Go to my website, www.rescue2recovery.com. That's the easiest way. I can probably send you my link to my LinkedIn, because they can set up a calendar and all that kind of stuff. But go to the website. My email is there. They can email me. My book is there, and all kinds of stuff. So, yeah, go to the website. Easiest.
Awesome. So I'll be putting all that in the show notes so people can kind of read it, just easily click and get to work with you. And definitely check out her book if you haven't done so already. I've ordered my copy, so I'm going to be reading that probably once it comes over the weekend.
I appreciate that very much.
Of course. And I love this conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here. And I really, really like I said, I had so much fun today.
Thank you. I did too. I really appreciate you. And what a great podcast you have. Keep going, man. You got this.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And for everyone, episodes come out every Friday at 7 a.m. So feel free to tune in for next week's episode. And thank you so much.